So what do you want? Just an intro on Fleek and how we got into the internet computer ecosystem?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, Fleek started about 3 years ago. Prior to that, we had built a company in the Ethereum space called Token Foundry. So we were pretty involved in the kind of ICO previous bull run of 2016, 2017, and a lot of doing a lot of token sale related things and infrastructure. Then we sort of decided we were more interested in the open web side of the ecosystem and narrative. So we wanted to really focus on building infrastructure related to that, and realizing that in order to really realize Web3, you needed a lot more than just the smart contracts to be, let's say, trustless. And so we wanted to try to help make those other parts of, let's say, like an Ethereum dApp trustless. So we started with IPFS and IPFS hosting, and then we added storage, just because that was kind of the first use case that the Ethereum ecosystem, in terms of an open web technology that they were using to like use in conjunction with Ethereum to do things like host front ends or store NFT metadata. So that's kind of where Fleek started, and that's what our main product today still is. We host probably 25,000 plus dApps and sites on both IPFS and the internet computer. And so that's how we got into the internet computer. Is even with IPFS hosting, we have to run IPFS nodes on AWS. So we have to use DNS. There's still a lot of centralized components that make it not too much better than centralized hosting, especially in terms of like a censorship resistance standpoint, because AWS could just shut off our IPFS nodes the same way, you know, they could shut off a site hosted directly on AWS. And also we've been trying, you know, to offer additional products for the past few years, database products, serverless function type products, storage options. But all of them, we kind of ran into issues of needing some sort of centralized infrastructure. And so we followed DFINITY and the Internet Computer Project for the past few years. And as it got closer to launch and we understood the vision and how much it kind of evolved, it really became clear that this platform could basically enable all the things we had been trying to do or find better ways to do for the past few years. And so we started with hosting, given that's our bread and butter, to offer just users a way to host dApps and sites on the internet computer. And now similarly, expanding into storage. But also we decided, you know, there was a lot other things we wanted to do, and felt there was a lot of opportunity on the internet computer. So that's where we decided to expand beyond just the Fleek developer platform and start building products across the spectrum, like Plug Wallet and Dank and several other things we have in the pipeline.
What is your further plans? For example, do you anything like sort of like storage or non-static hosting or some other functions?
Yeah, for sure. So we have a hybrid storage product that should be released in the next week or two. Basically, we've had a lot of requests from projects in the internet computer ecosystem who are looking for ways to store data on the internet computer. That first community proposal to increase canister limits on storage from 4 megabytes to basically, or whatever it is, 4 gigabytes. I forget the but now it's much larger. I think it's 300 gigabytes or whatever the subnet limit is. And sorry for not knowing those exacts. But anyways, that's a big step forward because now you could store larger data, but the costs are still pretty high. And also there's limitations on how much you could upload at a time. So basically upload and retrieval becomes an issue. And so essentially our IPFS storage product today, we store the metadata on S3, but the data itself is stored on IPFS because IPFS does have a lot of like built-in capabilities that make upload and retrieval quite fast. And so the first product is a hybrid storage product where you could store files on IPFS still, which the NFT community and like people love IPFS, but you could store the metadata on the internet computer instead of S3. So it's a step in the right direction where now that metadata is trustless and kind of like decentralized. And that it could also work where you could store the files on the internet computer itself. But today that's really only feasible for like small files. But the idea is as the internet computer evolves, probably as they release storage specialized subnets that are cheaper and more optimized for storage, and probably then they'll have even further optimizations for subnets that are maybe more for data redundancy or retrieval optimization and speed, and things they've discussed like Badlands, where you could have like these edge caching nodes. We do think that like storage on the IC will become like more and more attractive from a cost and performance standpoint. But in the meantime, we think this hybrid solution gets people what they want, and most importantly, provides a good user experience to users, which we always try to prioritize for. And then beyond that, like one of our big products is called Fleek. It's a new version of Fleek. It'll be Fleek.000 as the domain, but it's essentially a trustless version of Fleek that'll essentially be like exactly what Fleek is today, but fully built on the internet computer, no centralized infrastructure. And the idea there is that it'll just be an interface that sits on top of many different pieces of web infrastructure, not too different than how like Zapper or Xerion is an interface sitting on top of a bunch of DeFi infrastructure and protocols, but surfaces it in one seamless user experience so you can manage everything in one place, access everything you want to access in one place, whether it's a loan or being an LP or farming or whatever. So the idea for Fleek 000 is to be that, but sit on top of all the different web infrastructure that gets built. Some will be built by us, but the hope is that the majority of it will be built by others in the community, and we can just add support for it the same way Xerion or Zapper adds support for a new DeFi protocol when it launches based on, what they think customers will want or what adds, to their platform and user experience best. So that's where, we have done some research on some serverless function frameworks, some data. We built an IC database framework, which is kind of like what Big Map was supposed to be, but they never ended up like releasing it. So we had to build one ourselves. So that should be open sourced in the next few days. And then, we might build interfaces on top of pseudograph and on top of other infrastructure people in the community build, just so that developer can come to one interface and have that Netlify-like experience where they could, build a GraphQL schema for a database or, set up some serverless functions or connect to some external APIs or whatever, and it be fully trustless. That will be a tokenized community-owned thing. And so that's super exciting. And that launches on Tuesday, the 14th. So of version 1 of that platform. So any and all types of infrastructure and web services are, what we would look to surface there.
As DFINITY's plugin wallet, what kind of problems does Plug solve, and what drives you to build a wallet, to build a plug wallet on top of DFINITY, helping the DFINITY ecosystem and especially the users, the projects to solve the wallet problem?
Yeah, sure. So basically, every product we built so far was us trying to solve problems we had ourselves, trying to build this Fleek OOO platform. And so, like, basically, there was two main problems we had to solve with Fleek OOO. One was, since it's a developer platform, how do we get users access to their cycles? And so that was a twofold problem. One related to cycles, which is what led to Dank and XTC. And then the other was an authentication problem, which led to Plug. But before Plug, we did spend a lot of time and work trying to go in the internet identity direction, as did a lot of early projects, because, it was being sort of marketed as this like protocol native identity solution. And so it sounded really cool in theory. And so we tried using it and quickly learned of the limitations that internet identity kind of decided to build into their architecture. The main one being the host name URL specific principal IDs or identities. What that means essentially is that, like, when you access dApps, they're all under a different domain, app.uniswap.org or, app.ens.domains or app.sushi.com, whatever it is. And so with the way that internet identity is architected, every single URL you visit, you would have a different principal ID. So what that means is that your token balances or cycle balances or asset balances like NFTs would be specific to an interface. So you can never have something like a Zapper or a Zerion, because they wouldn't be able to surface your principal ID from all these different underlying protocols that you might be using. And so it kind of kills all the composability that makes Web3 what is the greatest part of Web3 is you have your assets in one wallet or one address. You can choose to use that address across all whatever interface you want. And that's kind of, and internet identity could make a lot of sense for something like an enterprise in a few years who comes in and needs an identity solution for a product that is really has no interest in communicating or being compatible with other apps or canisters out there. But for DeFi and tokens and NFTs and a lot of the use cases, the metaverse that we think are going to drive the early usage of the internet computer, and just where Web3 is going, we did not see it going back to a Web 2 sort of paradigm where you have basically siloed accounts specific to each app. We really saw it where the user is in control of their ID and they are free to use that ID across every and all applications they want and take their assets with them. Because with internet identity, let's say, Infinity Swap launches and DFINITY launches. So if you were to use internet identity and those apps were to integrate internet identity and you wanted to see which one had a better exchange rate on ICP to cycles or something, you would basically need to send tokens to each app. And then if you decided the other one had a better exchange rate, you would then need to send your tokens from, Infinity Swap to DFINITY and trade there and then send them back. But your tokens would be stuck in that interface, so you couldn't surface them anywhere else. It would just be really terrible. And I think that's why we're seeing apps like that already decide to go in the Plug direction, because Plug brings back that kind of the magic that Ethereum has with their DApp ecosystem and the ability to compose whichever smart contracts you want and combine apps and whatever you want. So that was really where we saw a problem. We spoke openly with the foundation and, expressed our concerns. They were very, in love with the idea of internet identity. So we said, that's great, but we feel that this is what's in the best interest of the community. So we decided, and we were open with them, that we were going to create Plug and try to push the ecosystem in this direction. And even though it's kind of marketed by the foundation themselves as like their identity solution, and even though early projects have went in that direction, we're already starting to see a lot of apps talk to us, reach out to us, wanting to switch over to Plug, because now they're realizing these limitations. For example, an app like Discover, they wanted to surface open chat functionality in Discover. Well, guess what? They can't, because the principal IDs for a user are different from Discover to open chat. So you couldn't kind of surface a user's open chat account in Discover using internet identity, because both the accounts are siloed. With Plug, you'd be able to do it no problem because the principal ID is the same. And so, now we're starting, especially projects that are focused on DeFi or NFTs or, these Web3 use cases. We're seeing a strong interest in Plug as a preferred option for auth. And so we're just, kind of identifying problems and trying to release solutions that we think are in the best interest of the community and what people are going to want. And so that's kind of how Plug sort of came to be. It was us trying to solve a problem for our own products, but us realizing that if we had that problem and we were coming to this realization, that probably most other projects eventually would too. And I think composability is a make or break trait that the internet computer, if there's no composability, will not succeed. And so we just felt it was very necessary for things to go in this direction if the internet computer is going to be as big as something like Ethereum.
So can you talk about the integrations between Plug and NFTs? Are there any other collections coming out in Plug's product?
In terms of just what's on the Plug roadmap?
In terms of your roadmap and in terms of your plans to integrate with NFTs.
Sure. So basically next week we will have support live for a bunch more NFTs. So any of the ones in the Entrepot marketplace would be supported in Plug, where they could be surfaced. So with NFTs, yes, our first thing is we just want to support the largest number of NFTs. So that right now is figuring out what standards people are using. That's step one. Step two on NFTs, we'll see. If we decide to go further with that, or surface any additional functionality besides just being able to surface your NFTs, transfer them, so on and so forth. But then on the Plug side, the big thing on the roadmap is the mobile app. So that's something we're working on and trying to get out, by late October. We'll see if we could get that out then, or might take a little bit longer, but it is interesting, especially in seeing the IC punks drop, how many people don't have a computer and just have a phone. So we want to make sure we could we could service that segment of the market. So we're very excited about the mobile app. And then other things on the roadmap are, just things like better user experience. We're very focused on, eliminating screens, or, like just really making the experience of using a DApp, viewing your assets, interacting with your assets, swapping your assets. So like things like Ledger app integration, so you could use a hardware wallet with Plug, is on the roadmap. Things like surfacing one or multiple of these AMM projects, so people could swap assets within Plug itself. Potentially, we could surface functionality like that on the NFT side of things. It should be, if it's built into the NFT standard itself, we should be able to surface if an NFT is for sale, or if you want to list it for sale. Those things should be able to be done through your wallet pretty easily and not be dependent on a marketplace. And then adding things like support for neurons for people who want to stake, because neurons are kind of like NFTs in a way. So those are just like, and then just better things like desktop notifications and better error handling and things like that. It's hard right now with just not being able to surface if certain activity related to, if you sold an NFT. So there's a lot of kind of plumbing work to get done to be able to surface events from canisters. So we can, provide to the user proper activity. I also think for NFTs, it's really important, to show that history of who owned it and, what the previous sales were or things like that. So there's a lot to get done. But that's kind of going to take up the rest of this year, is just mobile app and just really good support for other NFT standards, token standards. Make sure the experience when Infinity Swap and DFINITY and some of these first DeFi applications launch, that we support those tokens. The swap experience is really good. So yeah, and we're always just looking for ideas from users to kind of guide our roadmap.
What problem does DANT and the Cycles token help to solve for the community and the insane computer developers?
Sure. So yeah, this goes back to us discovering problems and products, trying to build Fleek 000. But essentially, first we had the authentication problem and Plug. And then the second problem was, even with internet identity or Plug, the problem was, how do you get access to these cycles for users? And the foundation was basically pushing this concept of a cycles wallet, a canister specific to holding cycles for a user. But that created a very clunky user experience where every time a user auth into the app, you would also have to auth and ask them for their cycle wallet canister ID in order to auth that and get them access to their cycles. So it'd almost be like having to enter a password every time to use Fleek 000. So you would need to worry about remembering this other unique identifier in terms of your cycle wallet canister ID, just for the sake of accessing and using cycles. We just felt like cycles should be treated like any other token, and the experience interacting with them should be just like ICP or any other token. And we felt that people were going to want that for both a developer experience, for use in DeFi, for use as a form of payment. For cycles are a pretty good stable coin, given it's backed by real computation. And so the same way the US dollar today is backed by oil, cycles are kind of a new version that is backed by digital oil or computation. So we do think it has a chance of becoming like the dominant stable coin for the internet computer, as opposed to using something like MakerDAO or like whatever that's backed by, an asset. It's just being backed by the native computation of the protocol seems really cool. And so for many reasons, we just felt like tokenizing cycles was useful. But we didn't want to just create tokenized cycles, because then that's really only focused on like the financial side of things. And we were more concerned about solving problems for developers. So we thought, well, the foundation created this cycles wallet and added functionality to that canister to make a developer's life easier, to deploy canisters, to proxy calls to a canister, etc. So we thought, what if we could add the functionality of the cycles wallet to the token canister itself? So now you have these tokenized cycles, but we make it a really good user experience for a developer to deploy canisters, refill canisters, do everything they need as a developer with this cycles token. So they don't need anything extra and can do everything they want just with this token. And so that's where the idea for XTC came from. And it also was the best solution to make Fleek OOO a really good user experience, where now we didn't have to support raw cycles. We could just have plug and XTC as the cycles token. And that's all a user would need to now have a full developer experience within Fleek OOO, refill canisters, deploy canisters. And so that was kind of how it came to be. And yeah, we're super excited about that. And, kind of just working out some of the, kind of less fun parts of storing history, making the architecture scalable, to basically future-proof it. But we also feel like that could be like a template, and a lot of those design patterns will probably be adopted by every other token in the future, because they solve some real problems that many people are kind of just ignoring at the moment and kind of just like cutting corners to get things out quickly. But these are real things that need to happen in order to make these things like move past the hackathon proof of concept to actually like, how do you support, thousands and, millions of canisters and millions of users, and the scalability and throughput constraints of the internet computer, and, making it multi-canister architecture, like, so things like that. But yeah, that's kind of what we're doing there. We have a few other ideas on the Dank roadmap, but like wrapped ICP is something people have asked for, just so in DeFi, if everything is moving towards like a principal-centric ID world, it would be annoying if every protocol and every DeFi app had to then worry about an account ID just for ICP. So we think like wrapped ICP is probably going to be the dominant used like form of ICP in DeFi and other applications. Given like you don't know a user's account ID by default, you would have to ask for it. So it's just better to keep it simple and just use a principal ID, kind of similar to how wrapped F is used in a lot of use cases on Ethereum. And yeah, we're still exploring on that front, around just cycle-based financial services and like other things that we feel people are going to need on the internet computer. So
what are the categories of dApps you're most excited about, and you think, and what is the categories of decentralized applications that you think will drive value to the internet computer?
Yeah, so I would say, I think like gaming and NFTs are extremely exciting. Not necessarily like in the context of like the current NFTs we see that are mostly just like static images, but really in the context of like these early experiments you're starting to see of, leveraging the capabilities of the internet computer to build logic into the NFTs so they could evolve, or, maybe you could use AI, or, just crazy different things that could take NFTs to a whole new level, or build in, functionalities such as like, building use cases on top of the NFTs, like a Spotify or a Netflix, or, something where like that isn't possible on a platform like Ethereum really, but it could be really easily done on something like the internet computer, where like the royalties, the payout streams, all these things could be baked into the NFT itself really easily. And I think that's where NFTs are going to have to go, is turn into these productive assets. And so I think that's the next big wave of NFTs. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I think that'll be one of the early winning use cases for the internet computer. Gaming as well, just running the simulations and stuff. I think, like, again, leveraging the unique capabilities of the internet computer. And then I'm also very interested in social. I think like that's social and non-financial use cases have been something I think people have been trying to do for a long time, but just didn't have a good platform to do it on. And again, I think the internet computer is really well suited for that. But I think like you can't just build a new Facebook on the internet computer. You need to leverage tokens and incentives to basically make a game out of it. So I think like across all these areas, like the gamification of everything, I think is the big trend. And so if you want to beat these existing social platforms, like we think like mechanism design and really like setting the rules of the game have to be established from the get-go. And that we think could lead to some really like powerful contenders that eventually like upend these existing platforms that are censoring everyone and deplatforming everyone and have very opaque rules. And then DeFi, we think, just needs to be there, just like every ecosystem needs it, because we want to launch tokens. We know people are going to want liquidity, so we think those are just necessary things that'll help the entire ecosystem and all the other use cases I mentioned that will have tokens or NFTs and are going to want, you need ways to be able to swap them or get liquidity on them. And then that'll just, accelerate things even further. But yeah, so NFTs, gaming, that whole metaverse direction is what we're most excited about, but social too, and kind of people experimenting with non-financial stuff and just gamifying all these apps today that people use. And that's pretty much it.